Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to see so many happy faces at this third day of intensive exchange of knowledge and experiences shared amongst audience. This is the last panel, and we have a renowned Mexican economist who is a colleague of ours, and the other panelists are Latin American economists. We have firstly Mr. Rolando Cordera Campos, economist, and then Freddy Ellis, he's a Minister of Well-being in Ecuador. He's also a journalist. And then we have Luis Mella, he is a politician in Chile. Juan Manuel Galan, he is from Colombia. And then we have Marcelo Saiduni from Bolivia. He's an advisor and a consultant. I will give the word to Dr. Rolando Cordera. And the intent of this panel is to reflect the Latin American experiences and work on a comparison for good practices of these policymakers, the good practices that can be shared by these policymakers. Dr. Rolando Cordera Campos, he is an honoris causa PhD by the Metropolitan University. He's an emeritus university from the UNAM University. He's a member of the National Research Center and coordinator of the Development Studies Center, as well as the new course for development that is part of the curricula at the UNAM, the National Autonomous University. Please welcome Dr. Rolando Cordera. Good afternoon. Thank you, Ubaldo, and I would like to thank the organizing committee for this interesting gathering. I am now reflecting on the topics, and I will sit down later on and thoroughly analyze the criteria that I normally use to get close to the world's reality, especially when it comes to Latin America, what applies to Latin America, and more specifically to Mexico. I moved somehow the strategy. I switched it around, given that I came to realize that what comes after me will be the experiences and case studies, some cases at least, of Latin America. Initially, I tried to generalize my speech regarding Latin America, knowing that in this case, such as in other cases, it's not recommended to generalize. We have a region that is not possible to generalize. As a matter of fact, we have not been able in Latin America to set forward a network per se, or a network region, if you will. And this is one of the curses from the colony that we inherited, one of the many curses that we inherited from the colony. And my Latin American brothers that are sitting down on the panel are now invited by me to work on this focus. One of the focus should be forging a region that is characterized by cooperation, exchange amongst the different citizens, different cities and countries. So I would like to welcome you from my humble position to Mexico, my country. I will not, I used to have a different title, as a matter of fact, for this presentation, talking about the harsh times during which we can recover or recuperate rather the development. However, I switched it so that I can better describe subjective well-being based on the objective discomfort and vice versa. And it was very hard to work on that type of title. However, I can tell you that I have many questions in my head now because of this well-being and development. That is the main title or theme of this forum. There's a great deal of effort worldwide to put behind our most precious legacy when it comes to economic manipulation, which is use for criteria purposes the GDP per capita. Ever since the Human Development Index was developed by Amartya Sen and his teaching, and now, more recently, with the notable report by Justin Stiglitz and Amariata, summoned by, back then, Sarkozy, the French president, former French president, all together with the OECD and recommendations by Bhutan, the Kingdom of Bhutan, we now have to deal with the need of incorporating new variables that will in turn help us better evaluate the situation of the societies. In fact, they should help us work on public policies or state policies that are more in accordance with the inventory needs and what the country is lacking. Likewise, the inspiration and aspiration of the communities. So we should politize the state role and de-economize it as long as it is possible. And these are some of the conclusions I will be reaching after listening to all the very enriching presentations that were given yesterday and the day before yesterday. So we would have to have an effort ahead of us, a great effort to examine this change and development process from a multidimensional perspective, which is a complex one, and it should be holistic. And this was also suggested yesterday, the holistic approach. However, I'm just an economist. I try to be a political economist. But I formed myself within that tradition, and I truly respect the institution and the concepts that during the 19th century, in light of Tomás Roberto Malthus monk prophecies, there was the lugubrious science, and the prophecies were not accepted, or they were not well accepted when referring to the impossibility of development because of the willingness of the people, the citizens, to reproduce themselves without considering how much food they would have. Now, thanks to the technology and the expansion of capitalism, all these situations were put behind. So this is the gloomy details that are now left in the past. So can we ensure reproduction of the species in the elemental functions? On the one hand, we have the feeding factor, and on the other hand, we have health and collective life capability. So this is what the world looks like today in the midst of a crisis. In the midst of a crisis that is still on, and apparently it won't stop. So we have talked about for years now, for decades now, that we might be entering a very extensive period of persistent stallment, as Schiller once said, the great philosopher, or a secular stalling, like another American important economist, say Larry Summers. So within this scope, we are moving around, and I believe that we need to debate this relationship or the possible homogeneity of the environment from a domestic and international perspective of this will be an objective discomfort instead of subjective well-being. So I would like to mention with that regard that this subjective well-being takes us back, and this was mentioned yesterday, this takes us back to the political agenda that cannot drift away from the social aspect, which is still overwhelmed by millionaire quota of poverty, as well as impressive inequality coefficients. And Latin Americans get together when analyzing these type of scenarios. When it comes to democracy, well, it's to a certain extent recuperated or constructed upon or somehow re-railed, re-driven, reanalyzed, especially in the southern hemisphere because of the raw material boom and the result of the extraordinary expansion of China. And we need to know all these factors. We are still the most unequal continent on Earth. And maybe it's not the poorest one, but we have many poor people. And especially when it comes to the field, out in the field or the outskirts, as well as the urban cities, apparently inequality has modernized itself, following the rhythm or at the same pace of our political spheres. And with enthusiasm, our elites, the social elite. So we have a combination of poverty, urban poverty I'm referring to, urban poverty, as well as the inequalities. My message or my takeaway to all of you would be the reincorporation of development, understanding it from a perspective of a change, a social and structural change process, combined as recommended by Joseph Stiglitz when Vice President of the World Bank, combined with a complex process of democratic learning. That is the idea of development I believe should be taken back, recuperated. And when I say getting this back, I mean that this type of information or this type of arena had been explained to us many years ago when Raúl Prebisch and Celso Furtado, amongst others, coined the Latin American development theory associated to what later on was called the Subseplan current, or thinking, social thinking current, or thinking. And back then they were thinking about how to build solid societies that could tackle all the problems that would come with a normal society by creating social inclusion and a robust society. But still today we have those same questions. How to build a demographic society that is that has solidarity. I would like to add democracy in acute conditions, especially when it comes to poverty, and to what extent we can talk about democracy for the reproduction of economic and social development. How can we work on substantial changes that can reduce and guarantee the universal exertion of or execution of human rights? Now, these questions or these situations are not only intellectual aspects, but they should embark upon the overall society's mindset in Latin America after hundreds of years of adverse situations, as well as over 2 decades of new democratic perspectives. We now have inequalities that could even be considered as part of the culture. So inequality is culture. It's our culture, and it's the culture based on concentrated wealth. And the anthropologists identify this from a different standpoint. So the social aspect that is of our most concern is the result of the societies. But it's also a condition so that the governments can renew the democracy, and the citizens, the governments can actually get the support from the citizenship. And Adela Cortina, famous Chilean, said that there's an active economy, and the society as well as the government should be the tripod for the society, a developed society to progress. We have the political, the economical, and the civilian aspects that are the cornerstone or the philosophical stone of all times. As a wrap-up, I would like to present the reality of my country to all of you, and I shall say, I'm not provoking anybody. I am not happy about the current situation of my country. It's rather an unhappiness state that I feel when facing this objective objective unrest. And we have some graphs here that on the one hand has a downward trend regarding the growth capacity from an economic stance. Hence, the lack of possibility to incorporate via the labor all those new generations. And this has been around for many years now, ever since the 70s started. And we have young adults and young adolescents that are very different today. And if we were to compare our generation to the generation 40 years ago, we would be able to understand what difference I am referring to. We lost the capacity to become prosperous. We, of course, have market-oriented technological changes that we have, of course, matched up to. We were excellent or superb exporters of manufacturing, and one of the most important builders or manufacturers of vehicles, automotive vehicles, as well as electrical and electronic goods. The economic geography was transformed from the northern region of Mexico and the central part of Mexico to a different new scene. However, this was not reflected on indispensable economy. The only thing was catching up. The only interest was to catch up with the rest of the world. Now, this is a trend I was referring to, of this downward pattern of our economic reality. Likewise, we became plural and democratic. And this is the House of Representatives. This is the lower chamber comprisal. And we now have the plurality that is in the present, not so promising as it was at the beginning of the process, but it's no longer possible to govern this. It goes all the way to decomposing excesses, such as is the case in the past years and in recent months, the tragedy in Iguala. So this was the process. This was the promise. This was what was promised. The demographic bonus that apparently was going to switch the ever-growing young generation with working capabilities and a higher scholar level, as opposed to the previous generations' average. Those generations that work on the industrialization since the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Of the 20th century. We move on to the next slide. Next, please. On the other hand, we have another analysis of this frustration or this failure within the structural change, and it can be better explained with this block over here. Since the year 2000 and 2010, we increased the labor force by 10 million. However, out of those 10 million, only 3 million could find formal jobs or formal positions, as we call them, and that is, or the blue part of this block indicate that they have access to Social Security and other benefits and perks. The red block is 4.3, which is informal economy, as well as informal labor, of course, that has no Social Security whatsoever, and very frequently, at large percentages, it's precarious and it's not well paid. So in that red block, the salary levels are very important, so that you can be happy or unhappy. Well, that depends on the person. But in that, or in those two blocks, the blue one and the red one, it is of utmost importance to have good income. And this combination that is not a fortunate one, we have the demographic bonus and informality in terms of labor. We now understand that we are not moving away from poverty levels as thought so back then. We had crisis in the 80s and the 90s, and we suppose that by now we would have drifted away from that tendency. However, we now have 61.4 million Mexican inhabitants or Mexican nationals that live at any given level of poverty. In 1996, we were talking about 64 million Mexican nationals. Now, we decreased those numbers, and the crisis came along, and there was a relative stallment of the economy, and we went back to the quota that we had back then, before these years, before these periods. Moving on. One more. Let's keep another one. Now, of course, when I talk about incomes and the wages do matter, this is what I am referring to. This is the wage structure. We don't get to the 11% of those that have a job, like myself, that make 5 minimum wages or more on average. Then we have 17.6% that make anywhere from 3 to 5 SMN, which is equivalent to minimum wage, and then almost 23% with an equivalent to 2 and up to 3 minimum wage. 25, 14 and 9, if we add up 25, 14 and 9 is equivalent to almost half of those that don't go beyond the 2 minimum wage. Well, 15% have 1 minimum wage, and this is on a monthly calculation, roughly $160 a month. This is the not well-being. This is the unrest, the upsetting conditions that we do hope it does not turn into a social unrest.
And the other side of this figure, of this shape, is this concentration of money. 10% of the wealthiest Mexico gets 41% of total income. So this relates to the addition of income and people who are from the poorest sectors, from 1 to 8. And it is not that concentration in terms of income and wealth sets us apart, but also we have separation from the social standpoint, from those social groups that get benefited by this mechanism and the rest of the city, not only those at the bottom of the society, but even those closer to the privileged groups have distance, have separation amongst themselves, and probably this is what is causing this unsettlement, this being not at ease, this discomfort that we heard of at the beginning of the 20th century. 10 years ago, the Nobel Award, the person awarded with the Nobel Prize, he said that if we continued with this level of poverty and separation, there was going to be this unease in terms of democracy. But what will happen later if we continue to do this, then it is that we are going to feel unease with democracy. And we need to think about this warning from the UN. The very recent events tells us not only about some abstract, generic unease, but now this is very, very closely linked to democracy, and it might be that people feel at discomfort and distressed in regards to democracy, the democracy that has taken us so long to achieve. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rolando Correa. I think the reflections he has just made in terms of social change, structural change, and taking democratic learning lessons, this is something we should try to implement at the different government levels. And now I'm going to introduce to you Freddy Ellis. He is currently working as a minister in the Department of Good Living. This is an initiative from Ecuador's President Office in charge of promoting human being transformation in order to conform the society of good living, a society that is fulfilled and fair. He was Secretary of the Andean Commission, Minister of Tourism, Vice President of the Parliament, and 2 times candidate for the presidency. He has represented indigenous groups and civil society groups. He is television producer and a journalist. He had this TV show called La Televisión, with the largest audience for 20 years. He was awarded with a 500 Global Prize, awarded or granted by the UN for environmental presentation. He practices Zen meditation and he promotes an aware lifestyle. Please. Thank you. I want to greet Rolando and my peers at this podium and everyone else. Despite the very brief time that we have heard to 70 lectures already. 70. Guinness record. We should get our PhD degree after listening to so many experts and so good presentations. I have never attended such an event earlier before. So I want to start by something sacred, something that comes from the Toltec group, this indigenous group in Mexico. We have heard millions of words, but I want to propose to you to do as Toltecs did. And it says in Archaeological Museum in Mexico, it says that they were very wise men that spent hours and hours talking to their own hearts. So let's have a moment of silence to listen to our own hearts. I think, and I truly thank you, I think the best would be to have these 20 minutes of silence. It would be much more useful to all of us, but I have to tell you something. And since I come from television, my origins are television, I want us to have some fun, to watch some video, and that I have brought with me, and that tell us somehow what Ecuador has done. Probably Ecuador is the first country that created the Ministry of Well-being. We have called it the National Department for Happiness. And we are at a very complicated moment. We are at a very, very difficult time. And a while ago, I met with somebody I love and admire, President Mujica from Uruguay. And it is not only that he preaches about good living and happiness, he practices that. And with two artists, they created a song. They composed a song about an imaginary town, Tlaquepaque. Tlaquepaque was half a century ago, where people used to live well, where there was a different way of seeing life. And we created this video that we want to share with you, that because this is what's currently happening in all our countries. Santa Marta, it is a song that tells us about all the peoples and cities in our America. Santa Marta used to be a village that used to produce rice with laurel trees by the path and with a main square and a cathedral. People used to greet each other, and some nights they would celebrate with young people and a municipal music band. Windows didn't have any fence. Nobody would lock their doors. At noon, everybody would take a nap or get together to eat. There was no marriage or war that was not celebrated by or ached by all the people here. Santa Marta used to have these Sundays and everybody would meet together and to get together also on winter evenings, and they had more time and they could share life without losing time in their cities. Government people don't rule the forces that are moving us today, nor the government, because we didn't come to this planet to develop it. We came here to try to be happy, because life is so short and it is fleeing. Nothing worth more than life, and this is the basic. So progress is coming, is changing Santa Marta. Television, cable TV, and access to internet. People has forgotten on the things they could do on a daily basis. Now they speak a different language and they live a totally different place. Santa Marta is playing to be first world because of the fast food and the fashion, celebrating Halloween. How surprising, but nobody leaves home without locking the door. There's no party, there's no celebration, there's no peace anymore. Santa Marta now is flooded with music and strange stores and things that come prefabricated and imported goods. People chase things nobody are interested on, but everybody loses their head. These are political character programs that tell us about the need to start fighting for a different culture. It is not about getting back to live in caves, nor either about setting monuments to the past. To the past. We now need to rule the market and not the market ruling us. Santa Marta now is surprised about Geneva summit, or if the Queen got sick, or if Palermo has some problem. This soccer team, and everybody's paying attention to a million new things, but nobody knows what's happening in their own cities. And although it is not so good to be isolated when everybody is connected, if the government is ruling us, we should never set culture apart. Not everything is on sale, not everything is a market. We need to get to see our roots. We need to consider the seasons. And of course, what can be wrong is everybody's connected, but the devil is ruling us. We should never set our culture aside. Not everything is on sale. If we have a tree with no roots, it's not going to stand the rain. So the deepest cause of unhappiness in current times is not wealth or poorness. Deep down, it is because we are terribly lonely. The poor person is not the person who has very little, but truly poor is the person who infinitely needs material goods and desires more, and more. Nothing is enough for those that enough is just a little. Epicurus, 341 years before Christ. And there are, thank you. This is what's currently happening. In the image here we can see a square and a triangle. What's happiness? Happiness is harmony, equality, solidarity, and this is what the Declaration of Ecuador for Well-being, Well-living has established through this development plan. The triangle says love, health, and money. When people are surveyed, they choose the triangle. The square is for well-being. The triangle is a Coca-Cola statement that has created an International Institute of Happiness, because happiness, as somebody said, has become an industry. And since this is what we aim to, now the system wants to sell us happiness through the sales of products. And this is a great deceit. And since we have very, very little time, I want to introduce to you President Rafael Correa, who has made living the core of his politics, of his policies. If we are ready with this video, I want to show it to you because we are short in time. And the video is ready. This is what he does every Saturday when he renders a report to the whole country. The wealthiest country are not the happiest. The objective is to be happy in this good living. Actually, wealthiest countries have the saddest people. There are very, very poor people, so poor that they only have money. We need to take good care of falling into consumerism. We have realized we are keeping the problem, increasing resources, increasing income. What for? And having more doesn't mean needing more, and the wealthiest person is not the one that has the most, but the one that needs the least. The happiest is not the person that owns most, but needs the least. And Saint Francis should say that I have so many things, I desire very little, and that would be probably the basis of happiness. But living aims to be an alternative to materialism and consumerism, and probably this is what we are addressing to. And the experiences of living are presided by Freddy Ellis. Some people don't understand what we are looking for. We need to find a new idea of development, something that we have called the good living, and this is the work that Freddy's labor is about, to remember young people about what real happiness is. And this is not carrying around with material goods. Poverty, of course, we need to overcome, but we don't need opulence. We don't need materialism. It is living on what we do with our souls. So this secretary, this department or agency is here to remember everybody about success, real success, preserving our values, our traditional culture, transcending. This is what outstands human beings from animals, this sense of transcendence. However, I still think that there is a lot of lack of awareness, because while we have this inequality in Mexico and misery is here, we cannot be happy in misery. Misery is not folklore. Misery is unfairness, is an insult to human dignity. Where are we heading to? What are young people looking for? Just accumulating, getting material goods. That's lots of emptiness. Life has another sense, and this is about proposing this through our department or agency for good living. Good living. So this agency for good living only employs 40 people, but it depends directly from the president, and it coordinates the whole public administration. So every action that is taken in Ecuador aims to find happiness, what we have called well living. So in this case, in Bolivia and Ecuador propose the same thing, and there is a very wide support from the whole country for several years, because I think something that is happening, and the money is not the only thing that can set our goals, but it is a real self-realization. And I had several topics, but I'm going to skip, and we're going to now to get to see the last video. It is so difficult to give you a message in such a brief time, to explain to you about this agency of good living is working at an international level. We have traveled many places in the world, lecturing and presenting. Yesterday I met with young people at the University of Guadalajara. Probably this was the best moment in my stay in Mexico, because we talked for a long time on what we are doing, and probably by joining myself to what has been done with these books a while ago. And from everybody here, let's invite one person. So as soon as possible, they come to Ecuador. So they visit Ecuador and they learn about good living in Ecuador. It is like seeing and believing. So when this session is finished, we can make a raffle. So we choose one person to go to Ecuador. So it is difficult to talk about well living. So we gather some people together, a great composer, music composer, and we asked them to compose a song that tells and explains what good living is about and how we can change our life model. So this is the result. And by this, I really thank you for your attention, and I congratulate everybody. This is something we're going to do by the end when David is here, because what has happened in Guadalajara is going to be a landmark. Remember, you who were here, someday you're going to say to your children and grandchildren, I was there when Guadalajara gathered 70 people from the whole world, 700 people from the whole world, to talk for the first time ever about the importance of happiness, love, and not greed and money. That these are the reasons to live for everybody here. And this is in brief what we do. And the path we set our footprints, and this is the future. The future is what we have planted. We can be happy and forget about payment terms, and we can fill our souls by smiling and singing. We will continue to dream. We will continue to waking up. We will always work. Whenever we can enjoy it. Life is what happens around while we learn, because the biggest wealth is every step we make. So what can I tell you about good living? Because it is inside you, and you have just to let it out. Good living is having your family breathing next to you. That's good living. Good living. Enjoying your work, being able to enjoy. That's good living. Good living. Enjoying the beauty our country shows or offers us. Good living is sharing with others what you want for you. Beauty exists if you want to look at it. Justice exists if we know how to forgive. Everything seems easy if we have the will to love everything we do and always improve. Every day that passes by is an opportunity to find whatever we're looking for, living with dignity. If we set our body and our mind on this, it is sure that we will progress and we will never lack anything. Good living is open our hand and ready to serve. That's good living. Good living. that everybody advance together, that nobody gets lagged behind, that there's enough for everybody and nobody lacks anything. Good. We want to thank Minister Ellis. After seeing this video, I always think about the very low budget that Latin American countries' government have, and we are going to accept this offering to visit Ecuador and see what they are doing and the mission they are accomplishing now. And now I'm going to introduce to you Luis Mella Guajardo. He's the mayor of Quillota, Chile since 1992. And the social proposal that has characterized his municipality administration has fostered the whole country to work on a program that is called Chile Solidario, Solidarity Chile. That is a set of public policies to help people in poverty to overcome their social condition and economic condition. And due to his work, he has been awarded at a national level several times. Good afternoon, everybody, friends. Thank you for this invitation. I want to thank everybody. Thank you. Truly, I want to thank everybody for your presentations, because this is encouraging me, motivating me. And I have to tell you, I come from Chile, from Quillota specifically. It is a community with 100,000 inhabitants, located 25 kilometers away from Santiago, 40 kilometers away from Viña del Mar. It is a farmers community that has decided on working for human well-being. Quillota is located by the core of the 5th region. It is an agriculture community. It is, as any other city and communities, it has many problems, facing many problems, from poverty, crime, alcoholism, and drug addiction. And I want to tell you about love. I want to tell you about human profitability. I want to tell you about collaboration versus competition. And I want to tell you about a model that is being successful, and it is possible to repeat it everywhere in the world. And it is possible to propose it to transform our societies. A while ago, you have heard and it is difficult to sustain a government position for so long. In 1992, in our country, we had the first municipal elections when we got back to democracy. When I was 31 years of age, I was elected Quillota's mayor. In Chile, in general, we have indefinite re-election. There are no terms, administration terms, and I have had the great opportunity that the community has re-elected me today. And the fact is that at the last election, it was a surprise for me, and I say this with all the humbleness I can say. I was elected with 70%, re-elected with 70% votes. And what does this mean? This means we have been able to undergo in a long-term project. At the beginning, we said Quillota, with this community where we did everything we were told regarding problems. We paved the streets, we built houses, we set these courts and fields for sports, and then we got there and we thought we would find everything wonderful, everything happy with our mayor, but we didn't find that. We found sadness, family violence, drug addiction, crime. And our mission was to improve the quality of life. And we realized something which is very, very important, that what people understand about quality of life were only material things. And what we were aiming to as a municipality was much more than that. And that's why we changed our mission for it to be the happiness of human beings.
We have Martin Seligman, the father of happiness, and this is The Authentic Happiness, which is the title of his book, and this is precisely what I would like to talk about. He says that happiness has a genetic predisposition that we all have, but there's a sum or an addition that has the circumstances plus the willingness. And when we are in the political position, we learned that politicians are always concerned about circumstances. And that means that one of the variables here of happiness is the only one that is taken care of. We try to solve problems. We try to understand what's happening or what people are telling us that's happening. But from the political perspective, we are not concerned about willingness, which is the spirituality and is a holistic view. And it also has to do with the sense of life, the meaning in life, and understanding what motivates me, what makes me be part or want to be part of a community so that I can be an active or play an important role in the transformation. So if we want people from Quillota to be happier, it's not only to have new streets or build new buildings. No, we need to build the house, the home, the comprehensive human being. Next slide, please. Now, all municipalities have 3 variables for development purposes that we work on: the economical, the social, and the urban development. So when it comes to a humanizing or human-oriented project, such as the one that we want to work with, aiming at happiness, and within that humanizing concept, we need to have the human right in the middle, not the market or the money or the power. We need to have the human being right in the middle of the formula. So the 3 pillars for the people happiness are hereby explained. We have had the marvelous opportunity to get in touch with a spectacular human being that was born in our country. He has international acknowledgement. Humberto Maturana, national awardee of science, and he is a counselor for many countries who was humble enough, and I truly thank God that this happened to us. He visited our city. He wanted to see firsthand what was happening with us. We wanted to reach out to him, but it was unattainable. Well, at least we thought so. But one professor went to his university and he said, in Quillota this happened, and in Quillota this is what happens. And it was so extensive, the comments were so many, that he said, you know what, I want to talk to you. We are tired of listening to this guy, this professor that is studying here at the university and talks about Quillota all the time. And then this dean went down to Quillota, and Professor Maturana visited us later on. And one of the many things that we have learned when being with him is that we need to understand the most important need of any human being, and that is to be seen. The human being needs to be perceived, acknowledged, recognized by others, valued by others. So, with that line of thought, we coined a term, and I want to share that with you, especially with economists, researchers, and I do hope that you take notes, and I do hope that you that have the capacities and the skills that I don't have, go beyond on this topic. And take this term, please. I need to explain this term, but in order to do so, I have to tell you a story. Once, I asked my people to take me to the poorest school in Quillota. I didn't want to talk to the teachers or the owner of the school. I wanted to, or the people that were in charge. I wanted to talk to the children. So I went there during recess, and I asked them what I could do as a mayor, the city mayor, for them. They listened. They listened to me and they say, let us think about it. We'll get back to you. That's what the children said. We'll get back to you. So I was patient enough. I visited them again, and I was prepared. I swear to God, I was prepared for, video rooms, conference rooms, classrooms, or of course I would have to comply with that. I would have to present that to the budgetary committees. I had to comply with that and compromise myself. I was thinking about millions worth of budget. But he said, please, musical instruments, city mayor, so that we can go on the 21st of May on the parade, which is a national holiday, such as the children, or to imitate the children that are in the private sector. We're not talking about 60, 80, or million. We're talking about 2.5 million Ecuadorian pesos, Chilean pesos, I'm sorry. And the children were given their instruments, they rehearsed, and I had the invitation to be part of this flag ceremony. and there was a miracle. Some people that hadn't visited the responsible committee members visited the ceremony. They were part of the ceremony to see how their children would receive the flag, and the school changed for good. 3 months ago, one Chilean magazine listed those schools that had raised the levels in the CINSE, which is a national evaluation, and that school was amongst the 10 schools in Chile that had the higher scores. And then the people in charge of the committee members and many people visited us, and we're not talking about 20 million, 40 million, 80 million. No, we're talking about 2.5 million. This is human profitability. Human profitability is a concept that we defined as how much can be gained in dignity, in motivation, and thanks to Dr. Maturana, Professor Maturana, how much a human being gains when being seen before any type of project. The children wanted to be seen. That's what they said. They didn't want to be ignored. They didn't want to be part of the attendees to the parade. They wanted to be part of the parade. And they wanted to be similar to the students from private schools. And then there was a palsy school, and the representative asked me to help them with a Cuban kinesiologist and all the project. Every time they presented a project, they say that it was not profitable. They say that it's too very few students, in this case with palsy, cerebral palsy, and the doctor or the kinesiologist was very expensive. So we dared to finance the project. Another miracle. So we had 15 committee members that created Esperanza 2000 or Hope 2000, and we saw how, based on that minor investment, there was this profitability test that was passed. It was a success after that. And with these words, what if economists and urban planners were to ask themselves how much money one can make, one human being can make when it comes to this dignifying position or the sole action of being seen by others? There's a political profit, of course, in all the projects that politicians carry out. But why not trust on the human profitability? We have had contact with many people that work with this. We have been in touch with the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, and other programs, for example, the Institute of the Well-Being in our country, and Humberto Maturana, of course, and many people that have helped us quite intensely. But this is the root cause, that takes us to questioning the current model. That's why I share every opinion. I agree with every opinion the minister said before me. Now, the current model is destroying us. The current model is damaging us, given that is one that makes us compete instead of collaborate. Why are we in an upsetting position? Well, let me tell you what Professor Maturana said, and I quote, "You know, City Mayor, what happens around the world, and this is because the human being has been wired or programmed to collaborate, and the world is asking, demanding that the human being competes, not collaborates. So whenever a project promotes collaboration, the well-being and happiness will prevail." And from a regional standpoint, let me tell you why I think it's possible to really implement this. This is a great scope of our project as proposed by Professor Maturana, and we believe in that. He believed in that, and of course we have to work from the cultural transformation, from competence or from a competition standpoint to collaboration. We no longer have to be competitive all the time, and we need to become collaborative. This is the Health and Culture Promotion Center or Development Center. We put together young people and people that are disabled. We have women that work with aerobics or aerobics class, and the elderly. We apparently this was a crazy project, and I put them all together in a house under the same roof. And when I proposed it, people said, "Are you crazy? What about the noise and rock and the elderly people listening to all this noise?" Well, this is life expressed as it should be, and everybody under the same roof. We believe that we need to, separate people. For example, the elderly right here and the young people right there. And but where we are out in the street, we find everybody walking on the same streets. And Professor Maturana has said this is intensely. He has expressed the fact that a society, the more representative a society is, the better it is. And then we had the elderly that had a very hard time. So now we created an institute for the elderly. Now, next case. I am a physician and I serve or I assist patients. And one patient once told me that she wanted to see me as a mayor, not as her physician. She told me that she wanted to move forward. She wanted to help others, but she had no idea where to start. And with that type of question, we understand that there are many banks to ask for a credit or a loan, a bank loan. But what about a bank where you can ask for love? There's not such thing. So we started working with this new idea in mind, and this is Ban Amor, or the Bank of Love, and it has profitability that can be granted in a 100% rate. Who can equal that number? But we're talking about 100% worth of profitability, human profitability, not credit profitability or loan or anything related to money. So the appointment of this money or this love, in this case, it would be placing it at precisely one portion of the location or helping others. And we will not depend on the mayor, we will not depend on the government, we will only depend on the community and the willingness of the citizens. And this is one project in Quillota that really fills me with pride. These are children that had disabilities, and oftentimes they would have to share their bed, they would have to die in terrible conditions, and this is a place with also some cancer patients. And we started with 10 beds, tiny beds, because we're talking about children. Now we have 42 beds. We have 2 houses that protect this, that shelter this, and then we had neurological patients that were also part of this house, this type of project. They were undertaken. And then we had an elder woman and a lady that said that they had a son that was addicted to cocaine, and he could not drift apart from the cocaine paste. And that base paste that causes the addiction for cocaine was also helped. And people told me, "Are you crazy mixing up the elderly or an old patient that is very sick or a neurological patient and a drug addict, a cocaine addict?" And the drug addicts understood what the life meant, what the meaning of life is. And as a physician, once I heard somebody telling me that somebody that was very sick because of cancer, or an elder patient or a neurological patient that could actually make it, I would have left the addiction behind long time ago. And now I can see in their faces that they can really make it, that they can really be healed. So next, I will just show some images. My speech is over now, but I do want to share a message with you, and this comes from the bottom of my heart. It's in our hands to really change the world. It's in our hands to change our cities, our countries. Being happy is a right, as stated on the slide. We need to dare. We need to believe that in love and in affection we have the solution. The solution is out there. We have to swim against the flow, and we understand that there's competition, and we have to rebel against that, and we have to rebel against those models that put money and the market as the most important issue, instead of having the human being right in the middle. What we want to say for Chile first and foremost, and then for the rest of the world, of course, with a humble standpoint, is that it's well worth it to really fight for the others, to really work for the others. And as Professor Maturana said, in collaboration and in solidarity is precisely where we can find well-being. If we want societies that are happy and with well-being and a better world from an overall perspective, we need to work for the others. We need to work for the brother and the sister, that other people's pain becomes our pain, and we need to participate. We need to get people involved whenever a person has a loving or an affectionate moment, that person changes forever. I have seen this at Kija. I have seen this at these shelter homes or nursery homes or these places that have helped others. And I invite all of you. I invite you to see this firsthand. Please come down to Quillota and you can see in practice what happens. When you see, you believe. Of course, you go to Ecuador and then you visit us. I can invite you, no problem. So please visit Ecuador first and come down to my city so that you can get to see what we have done. I invite you, really, from the bottom of my heart, to really believe that love transforms anything and believe that this world changed for the bad, for the evil, when we put the money on the market right in the middle, instead of having the human being as part of the most important formula. Thank you very much for your attention. Person I just presented or introduced to the audience is from Bolivia, but I have Mr. Marcelo Saiduni. He's an advisor and a consultant specialized in the well-being and also the traditional knowledge of the plurinational government of Bolivia. He's a consultant for the foreign affairs and also for the America's indigenous sector. He teaches the itinerating indigenous class. He's in charge of the construction of the metrics for well-being measurement and assessment. Thank you. Well, the worst enemy ahead of us is time. So, before I start my presentation, I would like to take a minute to thank you for your hospitality and this cordial invitation and the great celebration we had at the City Town Hall last night and the pleasure to listen to the Mexican mariachi. And for me, at least, it's quite emotional. I love Mexican music. And these are the images of our virgins. We have Tonantzin to the left and Pachamama, which is in Honolulu, Bolivia. And let me tell you what the similarities are. We have the mantle with the stars embroidered on it and the constellations. And that is the ancestral knowledge I would like to talk about today, because these are not mantles that were randomly designed. They had great depth of astronomy. And the images that went through a symbolic adaptation process suffered a dramatic period. They had to adapt or die. It was whether adapting or dying. And then we have the Tepeyac Virgin right on the monticle, which is the Tepeyac Mount or monticle that we know as Tepequila. It's very similar to the one they had in Quito, is Catequida, and very similar to the one in Bolivia, which is the Caliculo. And when listening to the Quilota's city mayor, Quillota is said or pronounced Quiluta in our country, so similarities, and it means the house of the moon. And we have Tepequilla, Catequilla, Quiticoyo, which is in Cochabamba, the later being in Cochabamba. So we have a different type of virgin, and then Quillota, which is in Chile. So we have a similarity amongst these images. And having said that, I understand that we can create relationships and liaisons or associations. And we had a technical gathering some months ago with people from Bhutan, from the study center, and it was a 2-day traveling effort, and also people from Ecuador under the Ministry of the Well-being, also one technician from the Coneval in Mexico City, and some people from Bolivia, of course the technical personnel. And we started working on this seminar. Of course, it's very small when compared to this type of forum we are at now, but we came to realize that we were able to find common situations for collaboration. That's why we want to thank Bhutan and Ecuador and Mexico, because of their expertise shared with us that led us to understand this cooperation. So now we need to digest what has happened during this past 2 days and a half in Mexico. Next slide, please. We knew that this crisis would come sooner or later, and we have the text from the Midos report in 1972 that stated that the growth limit would be, or the limit would be stated in 2008. But we go 40 years. Midos worked on a report for the oil crisis, so we have 40 additional years that set forward a curve which is less optimistic. We have the growth limit that is not the year 2080, but rather 2025. And based on that, we have a descending or downward curve, which is abrupt. This is like a roller coaster. When you go to the fair trade, and or let's say that you are on the plane and you go down abruptly. This is what happens here, a sudden gravity change. We will have our heart going in tachycardia because of the situation. And this is a civilization crisis. Now, at the Chancellery, or the Foreign Affairs Agency, we worked on this report. We based our data on Russian experiences, and we worked on coal and oil cycles. Now, the humanity, or the mankind, has two pathways ahead. Well, following on the roadmap that we have, and many of the presenters have warned us about that, or take into consideration many of the messages that we have heard during these forums, presentations, words that were shared based on the expertise of so many speakers and part of the life experiences as well, so that we can hear from them what they have as an opinion. Now, this is a conceptual change ahead of us, and in Bolivia we started working on this based on the constitution reform for the plurinational state of Bolivia, while incorporating the well-being, such as Ecuador and Bhutan's case, as part of the constitution. So looking for the well-being, or any other concept that might apply with the same meaning, of course. So we have then declared 13 items. This is the 2025 agenda, and this can be downloaded from the internet. Of course, we want to get there. We want to get to the 2025, and we have the transversal or cross-sectional baseline that is based on these 12 items. So we have coincidences with Bolivia, Ecuador, and Bhutan, and I believe that the state of Jalisco is on the right track, given that there has to be information that's part of the public policies, but they have to be also amendments to the Constitution. So when you find solutions amongst your scientists, your technicians, or technical experts, then you have to look for the crazy ones' opinion, and crazy ones always have, the crazy ones within the society always have a solution. So that's what we did. We talked to people outside the academia and the other expertise groups, so that we can see how we can go about this. Next 2 slides, please. This is a teaching comparison, or didactic comparison with symbolism. On the one hand, we have the turtle and the fox. Maybe you know this fable. And they compete, and of course the turtle beats the fox because she's persevering. She attains personal or individual success, and this is competition, as the mayor stated before. On the other hand, however, we have the Zapaya, or the Korangal Valley legend. This is a legend, and we have the Suri. This is kind of like a stock, or the nyandu. It's very similar to the ostrich in the region, and it would eat all the tadpoles and all the frogs, and gradually the little frogs or the tadpoles were disappearing. But one stood up and said, "This is no longer possible. I will complain to the commodore, the condor, which is the manager, the general manager of this valley." And yes, the condor. And we're talking about the condor or the eagle, the bald eagle. And I am protesting because I don't want this talk to or this this ostrich to eat us anymore. And the proposal was to run a race all the way to the lagoon, and the one that beats the other one will have to give the other one what he or she is asking. In this case, eat. And well, of course, the ñandu, ran pretty quickly, but then there was a little frog. The frog was there. I say, "This is not possible. How could this be?" And then the ñandu starts running even more rapidly, and then he finds himself with the frog again. And once again, the frog was there. And there was a moment when the ñandu collapsed. It was pretty tired. It was exhausted. However, it beats. But up until today, the ñandu no longer sets a foot on this valley. What happened? What was the truth behind this? Well, the frog sat down with the brothers and sisters one night before and say, "You know what? We are all alike. We are similar. Nobody will notice the difference. So we will have posts and we will try to replace one another. And this is like an athletic post race. And we will collaborate so that this big animal, the ñandu, doesn't notice it." So with that, the message is that we have to have all the opinions together. We have to put them together, and all those expertise and experiences, understanding individualism, which is, as Mujica said, the great disease, the major disease that the new or modern man has created. And we can eliminate that ailment by becoming cooperative, collaborative, and working all together. I would like to truly thank you for this invitation and my dream come true, and that is listening to the mariachi live performance. Thank you very much for your attention, and this is the message I would like to leave you with.
Thank you, Mr. Sundan. Now we have Mr. Ambassador, as I introduced him earlier. He's speaking some native language now. And please excuse me by greeting you in my native language, that is Quechua. But I want to show that the real wealth, the deep wealth of our peoples, it is the indigenous peoples who are guardians of such inheritance. El Dorado, this legend, this great golden city, becomes a symbol, or it might not be a symbol, but it represents the wealth these peoples used to have. And it have been the indigenous peoples throughout the world in charge of taking care, preserve, maintain the wealth. And we have gotten to a moment when we have to recover and show this to the rest of the world. This great wealth that our indigenous people have, I want to share with you one of them for the 10 minutes I have been assigned with, and it is called Living Well. Living Well, or in two languages, Sumas Causai, Sumai Camaña. This is in Quechua language that they also talk in Ecuador. And Suma Camaña is also Living Well from Aymara language in Bolivia. But this philosophical line that is much more than a paradigm and much more than a principle, it has not only been recovered and reflected upon, but it has become part of the Constitution. Since February 2009, it has become part of the new political constitution of Bolivia. And it is established very clearly on the 8th article of this constitution. So let's continue with this. We call it living well or good living, and this is the translation from these indigenous words I said earlier. comes from recovering ancient wisdom from our people, from our peoples. It is through this wealth, cultural wealth, that our ancestors have left to us, and now we're undergoing this recuperation process in order to provide an alternative to the whole humankind, to the whole societies, to everybody, so that we find an alternate matrix to live on. The current one is undergoing a crisis. We know this very well, but we need a proposal. We need a new proposal that will recuperate the harmony and equilibrium between human beings, humans to themselves, to the neighbors, and to nature, whatever vision of the divinity we might have. This is not a paradigm nor a principle. It is for us a very deep philosophical line. And beyond translation, because as I said, it comes from two native languages, Quechua and Sumascausa, and Aymara Sumascamaña, the words to refer to good living or living well. It goes beyond good and bad, worse and better. It means fulfillment, truly reach fulfillment. How can we attain this? We're going to see this later on in my presentation. How do we understand this? It is not only theoretical knowledge, it is also practical experience. And in order to walk on this track, we need to understand not only through the mind but also through the heart, by understanding and feeling with our hearts. The current civilization model tells us about living well, living better. We always live better than something. We try to be better than somebody. We try to surpass the others. And this is a current model. This is the current model we're living on that has set the humankind at a crisis, at stake. And there are several effects of such a crisis, because the humankind has become more dehumanized. We have lost diversity in wealth. So now we're looking for homogeneity. We're looking for one single way of being for everybody. This living better has made that some are on above others, and in order to reach higher places, higher positions, they have stepped on, they have damaged, they have stolen. And this living better is a model that we don't share at all. We think this is the current civilization model that is in crisis and has set humankind at stake. And December 21, 2012, we have talked about Pachacutis time. I don't know if you know, in Bolivia, in the island of the sun by the sacred lake called Titicaca, we held a great event where we were able to recover the time for balance and harmony, fruit from the Mayan civilization that you have in Central America, that was telling us a period, a cycle of time was ending. Not that humankind would end, as it has been shown by some interpretations, but it referred to ending a cycle to start a new opportunity cycle, ending with chaos in order to start now with Pacha, or harmony and balance. So living well for us, or good living, is a philosophy of life that we have recovered from ancestral knowledge, as I said earlier, from the original peoples of the Andean and Amazonic areas. This is a theory. This is where the theory comes from. Living well from the practical standpoint refers to learning, and I quote, and I really would like everybody to understand this, not only through the mind but through the heart as well, to learn to move ourselves in accordance to the laws of nature and cosmos, or the universe. What does this mean? This refers to recuperating this deep law that comes from the wisdom of our people, that is expressed in their geometrical codes. In so many ways they have left this message. So living well refers to building harmony and balance between the individual and the collective. And this is very, very important. This is complementing each other. Individual balance is sumak hakanya, but that has to transcend into the collective. That is summa camaña. That's a higher level. And a definition that can set all this philosophy in a few words, we can say it's a philosophy that values life, balance within ourselves and collectively, and being well with the community. It means reaching harmony with other human beings and nature. This is what is included in this philosophy that Bolivia is proposing for living well. It is not only the man what matters to this planet or to this universe. It is life as such. We think that we need to go beyond. We need to reflect upon more things than human rights. We think it is necessary to talk about the rights of life. We cannot limit ourselves to talk and work, making man the core of everything. Life is the center, and in all its expressions. So living well aims to reach harmony and balance with our basic relations as human beings. So these 4 basic relations, as I said earlier, are basic. This is something basic we need to understand, and based on these relations is where we are building in Bolivia our metrics to measure this living well. But living well encompasses happiness, but it is just a component. It is not everything. And these 4 elements are balance to ourselves, identity. We need to learn to accept ourselves, recognize ourselves. A second element would be balance and harmony to other people, to the community collectively, to learn to live collectively in communities, to learn to understand each other, accept each other, collaborate together. A third element is the need of balance, the need of harmony between us and nature, or as we call it in Bolivia, Pachamama, that's Mother Earth. And this is basic element from what I said, from life rights, the rights of life. Pachamama is not only the mother of the earth of Bolivians or Latin Americans, it's the mother of everybody's earth. So if we accept this idea as such, we are going to understand we are brothers. We have this brotherhood link, and this is not only humankind, plants, animals, and not only that, the air, the earth, dirt, everything that nature is. And the last refers to spirituality, our relation to the divine, our learning to accept that very rich spiritual and deep wealth that every human being has and every community has. We need to translate spirituality into 2 basic things, values and principles. If we are able to understand, all of us to understand the sets of values and principles, and we live on them, and we set them to practice, our civilization could evolve much more, could organize itself much better in terms of practical things, the best practices of good living. And probably later on we can share more elements of our philosophy, but this is what we wanted to share with you, that from Bolivia we have started with this rediscovery of our own identity. In Bolivia we used to have a very strong identity crisis. 25 years ago people wanted to change their names, their last names. They could, if they could have changed their color, the color of their skin, because they try to be somebody else. But now we have learned to value ourselves, and from then on Bolivia has started recovering not only their identity but recovering the wealth, the natural wealth, their economic wealth. And they are showing, Bolivia is showing that this is important to all humanity, to learn to see ourselves, to accept ourselves in order to promote balance with the other peoples in the world, in order to really be able to build a global community that respects sovereignty, that respects other people's right. But not only that, a community, global community that constantly practices social control, in the aim to build a great family, to advance and construct a new society that refers to living well. Thank you very much. And from the organizing committee, we want to apologize. Some people have to take flights to get back to their cities. Now I'm going to yield the floor to Dr. David Gomez Alvarez, who is the Subsecretary of Planning in the government office, and he's also the coordinator and organizer of this forum. Hello, everyone, and I apologize. We need to turn back this hall and we need to fly back home. We are very happy but very tired as well. First of all, I want to thank everybody for having stayed here for 2 years and a half with very dense panels, very deep in information, very fun, lots of fun, but it has been very intense. We have been many hours here and learning, reflecting and thinking about what's next for this country and for the Latin American region. And we were going to make a recap of all the findings and conclusions, but obviously now after listening to all this is going to be boresome and tiresome. So now we're going to talk about the future. First, we need to say that for those people who attended this forum, you will be able to unload the certificates for attending this. You will be able to print them yourselves, so you're going to be with the document that proves you were here. And secondly, the website. This forum website is going to become a kind of platform for the Latin American network for well-being, subjective well-being, quality of life. We, with our colleagues from the different governments in the region and with the support from the OECD and other international organizations that will support us, as well as CAF, the Latin American Bank for Development. So this new website is going to become our platform where we are going to be able to work, to meet together, academicians, government officials, business people, activists, citizens who are interested in these topics that range from very ethereal and abstract and complex things as spirituality up to very, very concrete and technical things as indicators are. So this is an enormous space for the convergence, and this is a very, very inclusive and very provocative. It will include people from this region, but also from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from North America, from Australia and New Zealand. They have established contact with us late, but now they have expressed their interest, and as Minister Ellis, Guadalajara has become a landmark for Latin America. Peers from Ecuador, from Bolivia, from Chile, and people from other countries that have advanced more on this track are here with us today. And Mexico is keeping up with what has happened in Latin America. The idea is to start here dialogue, to take what we have made, lots of traditional discussion, of course, but also we establish dialogue under these new perspectives, these new paradigms, these methodologies that allow us to debate in a wealthier manner, to talk about development, prosperity, well-being, and why not happiness. I want to thank everybody. We had more than 60 speakers who had 62 speakers in Guadalajara coming from 22 countries. We had more than 1,000 attendees to this forum. We have your information. And we're going to have some... We were able to set a Twitter account, and we were able to keep in touch with people in our country, people in the world. And first, we became a trend in Guadalajara, but then for 2 hours we were trending topic in Mexico. So we made noise, we established good conversations, and this is something that makes us very happy, very tired as well. And I invite you to the next event that is going to be held October 2015, as it was announced by President Soho and in his representative and the representatives from the OECD. It's going to be held in Guadalajara, the 5th Forum on Statistics and Public Policies with a core on well-being. So parallel to this, we're going to have another meeting like this one. So we will meet in 11 months here in Guadalajara once again, October 2015. Thank you and good afternoon.